I'm born and raised in South Georgia, Albany, Georgia, which is Southwest Georgia, on December 1954. So I grew up in the late 50s, early 60s as a child. So days of still very strong racial segregation. My mother and my father both were very socially conscientious people, and were both involved in what became known as the Albany movement. I do remember as a very small child, my father, very strong feelings about equality and race. And if you know his story, you'd understand why. He grew up as a sharecropper. When he was 16 years old, his mother, who was 39, I think at the time, had a stroke. She lay in bed at home for 2-3 days, during which they could not get any medical attention out to her physically. And so he watched her die. And my father idolized his mother, absolutely idolized his mother. And that forged him. He felt that had she been affluent and or white, that doctors would have been there. They would have had the ability to get her medical attention. And he felt that she passed away unnecessarily at a very early age. She left 8 children, the youngest of which was an infant. And so my father, as the oldest son, then had an obligation to help feed those children. So he quit school and started to work full time. Did that for 4 years. During that 4th year, he got permission from the landowner, Mr. Lott, to do, besides his regular working duties, which he was going to work with my grandfather every day, sun up to sundown, he got permission to use his favorite mule. He called him Blue, his favorite mule, to farm an extra 5 acres where he could farm that himself, harvest it, and then get the money from that because he wanted to go buy a wardrobe and go back to school. And so he was given permission to do that. And at the end of the season, he and my grandfather went to, quote unquote, settle up for the year. Mr. Lott came out with a ledger book on his back porch, and he said to my grandfather, so he called him John Thomas. He said, well, John Thomas, I guess you're here to settle up. And my granddaddy, according to my father, my granddaddy said, yes, sir, we are. He looked in his book, turned some pages and whatnot, showed them absolutely nothing, but he looked up and he said, well, John, you had a good year. You cleared your corn. So what that meant was, I'm not giving you any money, but the corn that you harvested out of my field, you can go sell that, and that's what you live on for the winter. He didn't mention that extra 5 acres that my father had gotten permission to also farm and harvest, and that he had worked by getting up before sunrise with Blue to do double duty. So my father, knowing that he had neglected or forgotten, went to speak up. What about my land, my crop? And my grandfather kicked him and told him to shut up. He told him, look, and this is a term that I shouldn't use, but this is what my father told me. As he and my grandfather walked away, 2 things that stood out to him and to me about that. My grandfather said, he didn't forget, these crackers will kill you out here. So you need to understand that. And my father said he just couldn't understand how anybody could just take everything from his mother's children, seeing that they were raggedy, some of them didn't have shoes, I mean, and winter was approaching, and how can you not care about these people's welfare? My father left the farm that day. He didn't spend another night. He stuffed what he could in a bag, and he walked 19 miles to Douglas, Georgia, from Broxton, Georgia. As he was walking those 19 miles, as fate would have it, Mr. Lott passed him twice. He came by him first in a car going in the same direction toward Douglas, the bigger town in the area. Hours later, he came back coming the opposite way in a new car. In my father's mind, until the day he died, he felt like the money taken, stolen from him and his family was amongst the money that made it possible for Mr. Lott to buy that new car. And that may not mathematically add up, but that's what my father felt. He never went back to the farm until much later in life, after he had finished school and become an adult and whatnot, and had become a successful business person. He and one of his former roommates from college went back to Broxton, pulled up to the big house. My father went to the door, knocked on the door, waited a while. Mr. Lott, who is much older now, of course, came to the door. He didn't immediately recognize my father. So he said, "This is Buddy," and he said, "Mr. Lyon," I said, "Oh, Buddy, you grown up. It's good to see you. It's been a long time." He looked at Mr. Lyon and said, "I just came out here to thank you for taking advantage of me and my family and my father and treating us like the dog that you did, because had you treated me halfway decent, I'd probably still be on this farm." And that's what he said he had to get out of his system. And he said, Mr. Lott said, "Oh, Buddy, those were different times, and don't feel like that." But Daddy didn't want to hear any of that. What he knew was that they suffered a great deal. It was a great indignation. And the one thing I missed about that day that was unique, it was my father, the only time he ever witnessed his father shed a tear. It's the only time he ever saw his father break down. Because apparently my grandfather felt so badly that it happened in front of my father. He was so looking forward to going back to school again. So he did. He left in town. He ended up going back to school. By the time he finished high school, he was 21 years old. He's grown, because he had stayed out for 4 years. He made his way to Morehouse College because he was so impressed with a speaker that he heard in assembly during high school. And this man had graduated from Morehouse, so he applied and went to Morehouse, worked his way through and whatnot until he got into the Army, like I said, and then came back and finished. So I also am a proud graduate of Morehouse. That was the one thing that Daddy probably instilled in me at an early age, that you need to go to Morehouse, son. And I did. I ended up going to Morehouse and was happy to do it.